The morning sun of Axis Prime filtered through the massive windows of the Galactic Collegiate Institute. Jiwan sat in the back row of the lecture hall, his notebook open and his pen ready. Around him, students from hundreds of different species chatted and laughed. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few were just clouds of gas held together by containment fields. The diversity always amazed him, even after 3 months at the academy. Beside him, Hiran scrolled through her datapad, reviewing notes from the previous class. She was one of only 15 humans at the entire institute, studying galactic law while Jiwan focused on xenobiology. They had become friends quickly, drawn together by their shared background and the subtle isolation that came with being human in a galaxy that barely knew Earth existed. Professor Korin entered the room, his insectoid body clicking softly as he moved to the front. The massive creature had taught galactic military history for over 60 years, and his reputation for strict but fair teaching preceded him. The room fell silent as he activated the holographic display. "Today," Professor Korin announced, his translator rendering his clicks into perfect standard speech, "we discuss the universal combat regulations and the most controversial rule in modern galactic law." The hologram displayed a list of regulations. Most were standard. No biological weapons, no targeting of civilian populations, no orbital bombardment of populated worlds. Then the professor highlighted one regulation that made several students sit up straighter. Regulation 7.3, he read aloud. "Humanity is hereby banned from participating in any interstellar military conflicts, effective immediately and in perpetuity." The lecture hall erupted in laughter. Jiwan felt his jaw tighten. This was not the first time he had heard about the ban, but hearing it announced so publicly, so casually, still stung. Around the room, alien students turned to look at the human students, pointing and whispering. Talvik, a reptilian student from the Saurian Dominion, stood up from his seat 3 rows ahead. His scaled face twisted into what passed for a smirk among his species. "Professor, is this regulation real? Are humans actually so weak that the entire galaxy has to protect them?" More laughter filled the room. Jiwan's pen stopped moving. Hiran's hand found his arm, a silent warning to stay calm. Professor Korin raised one of his appendages for silence. "The regulation is indeed real, and it was passed by unanimous vote of the Galactic Council 80 years ago. But why?" asked another student, a floating being of pure energy. "What could possibly justify banning an entire species from helping their allies?" "The official reason," Professor Korin began, but he was immediately interrupted. "They were useless," Talvik shouted, prompting cheers from his friends. "Humans are primitives. They barely have space travel. Of course they needed to be banned. They probably ran away from their first battle." Hiran stood up, her face flushed with anger. "That's not true. Humans have served with honor in every conflict we were part of." "Then why the ban?" Talvik shot back. "If you were so honorable, why did the council vote to keep you out of warfare? Face it, your species is too fragile for real combat." The room exploded in discussion. Students from warrior species laughed openly. Others whispered behind their appendages and tentacles. A few looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up in defense of humanity. Jiwan remained seated, his expression blank. But his hands, hidden under the desk, were clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. Professor Korin tried to restore order. "Students, please. The historical context is more complex than you realize. If you would allow me to explain—" "There's nothing to explain," Talvik interrupted again. "Weak species need protection. It's natural law. Humans are just another example." Several students cheered. Someone threw a crumpled paper toward the human section of the lecture hall. It missed Jiwan by inches. Hiran sat down, her eyes wet with frustrated tears. She had tried to defend their species, but her voice had been drowned out by mockery and jeers. Around the room, the few other human students sat in silence, their heads down, enduring the humiliation. Professor Korin attempted to continue the lecture, but the damage was done. The rest of the class devolved into barely contained mockery. Every time the professor mentioned human involvement in anything, students would snicker or make comments. When he tried to discuss the contact wars, Talvik loudly asked if humans had been used as medics since they were too scared to fight. By the time class ended, Jiwan had not written another word in his notebook. He gathered his materials slowly, waiting for the room to empty before standing up. Are you okay? Hiran asked quietly. I'm fine, Jiwan replied, but his voice was flat, emotionless. They left the lecture hall together, walking through corridors filled with alien students who pointed and whispered as they passed. Jiwan heard the word protected at least 3 times. Someone called out fragile humans and laughed. When they reached the human dormitory section, they found messages scrawled on the walls in luminescent paint. Too weak to fight. Babies of the galaxy. Earth's shame. Dowan, Jiwan's roommate and an engineering student, was already trying to clean the messages off. His jaw was set in anger, but his hands shook as he worked. It's getting worse, Dowan said without turning around. After that class, everyone thinks they can mock us. Hiran pulled out her communicator and started taking pictures of the vandalism. I'm filing a complaint with campus security. They won't do anything, Dowan replied bitterly. They never do. Jiwan stood in silence, staring at the messages. His mind was working through something, processing information in that quiet way he had. Finally, he spoke. We need to show them the truth. Hiran looked at him. What do you mean? The ban, Jiwan said slowly.
They think they know why it exists.
But they don't. Not really. Jiwan, the historical records are classified, Hiran said, though her voice carried a hint of hope. We can't access the actual documentation from the contact wars. Professor Koren has access, Jiwan replied. He's one of the few beings old enough to remember. And he tried to explain today. He knows the truth. Dowan stopped cleaning and turned around. You want to ask him for help? I want to ask him for the truth, Jiwan corrected. And then I want to show everyone why we were really banned. That evening, Jiwan's communicator buzzed with an anonymous message. It was a simple image. A human flag with the words protected species written across it in mocking text. Below it was a single question. Need the galaxy to hold your hand? Jiwan stared at the message for a long time. Then he deleted it and opened a new message to Professor Koren. His fingers moved quickly across the keys. Professor, I would like to request access to the historical archive regarding the contact wars and Regulation 7.3. I believe my fellow students deserve to understand the full context of humanity's ban from warfare. Please let me know if this is possible. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. 2 hours later, his communicator buzzed again. This time it was from Professor Koren. Request approved. Meet me at the restricted archive tomorrow at 800 hours. Come prepared. What you will see cannot be unseen. Jiwan showed the message to Hiran and Dowan. They looked at each other, uncertain but determined. Are we really doing this? Hiran asked. Jiwan nodded slowly. They want to know why we're banned. Let's show them. 2 weeks passed and the mockery only grew worse. Jiwan found his laboratory workspace vandalized 3 times. Someone had erased his research data, destroyed his biological samples, and left notes calling him weak. Hiran had her legal brief stolen from her locker. Dowan's engineering project was sabotaged the night before his presentation, causing him to fail his midterm evaluation. The human students met in their common room one evening. There were only 15 of them in the entire institute, and they all looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed their eyes. Some had bruises from being shoved in hallways. Others had stopped attending social events entirely. Mirai, the head of the Human Student Union, stood at the front of the room. She was a third-year student studying interstellar politics, and she had reached her limit. This can't continue, she said firmly. We came here to learn, to represent Earth, and to build relationships with other species. Instead, we're being treated like children or pets that need protection. What can we do? Asked another student, a quiet girl named Yunji who studied art. They won't listen to us. We make them listen, Mirai replied. Jiwan has been working on something with Professor Koren. Tell them. All eyes turned to Jiwan. He stood up slowly, his expression serious. I've been accessing the restricted historical archive, he began. The classified records from the contact wars. The real documentation of what happened 80 years ago when humans first fought alongside galactic forces. And? Dowan prompted. Jiwan's voice was quiet. And they have no idea. None of them. They think the ban exists because we were weak or incompetent. They don't know the truth. So we show them, Mirai said. We request a formal presentation. We make it public. We force them to see the actual historical record. Hiran shook her head. They'll never agree to attend. Why would they waste time listening to humans explain why they're not weak? They'll just mock us more. Then we make it a challenge, Mirai suggested.
We tell them we're going to defend humanity's honor.
We make it sound like entertainment. They'll come just to watch us fail. The room fell silent as the humans considered this. It felt like a trap they would be walking into voluntarily, but it also felt necessary. I'll do it, Jiwan said quietly. I'll present the evidence. The next day, Mirai posted a formal challenge on the campus network. The human students request an open forum to present the historical truth about Regulation 7.3 and humanity's ban from warfare. All students and faculty are invited to attend. The response was immediate and exactly what they expected. Talvik was the first to reply publicly. This should be hilarious. Watching humans try to defend their weakness will be the highlight of the semester. Other students piled on with comments. Bring snacks, this will be entertaining. How long before they cry? I'm taking bets on how many excuses they make. But the challenge was accepted. The presentation was scheduled for 3 weeks away in the Grand Auditorium. Over 2,000 students confirmed their attendance. Jiwan spent every free hour in the restricted archive. Professor Koren had granted him full access with only one warning. Are you certain you want to do this? Some things once seen cannot be unseen. The archive was located in the oldest part of the station, a section that predated most of the current buildings. Jiwan had to pass through 3 security checkpoints and provide his biometric data each time. The archive itself was a massive circular room with holographic storage systems that held billions of documents, videos, and audio recordings. Librarian Zeth, an ancient being whose species had been extinct for millennia, maintained the archive. His consciousness existed as pure energy within the station systems. When Jiwan first arrived, Zeth's voice echoed through the chamber. Young human, you seek the forbidden records. I seek the truth, Jiwan corrected. They are the same thing in this case, Zeth replied. I was alive during the contact wars. I remember what your people did. Are you prepared to see it? Jiwan nodded. Yes. The holographic displays activated, and the first recording began to play. It was helmet camera footage from a joint operation. Jiwan watched as human soldiers fought alongside aliens he recognized from campus. The footage was raw and unedited. He saw humans bleeding, screaming, dying, but he also saw them protecting their alien squad mates, covering retreats and holding impossible positions. By the 3rd day in the archive, Hyerin joined him. She sat beside Jiwan as they watched recording after recording. Some made her gasp. Others made her cry. One particular battle recording showed a human medic named Sora, running into enemy fire 6 times to pull wounded aliens to safety. She died on the 7th attempt, her body torn apart by weapons fire, but she had saved 11 lives. How did we not know about this? Hyerin whispered. Because the galaxy didn't want us to, Jiwan replied quietly. They classified everything. They buried it. Dowan came on the 5th day. He lasted 20 minutes before he had to leave the archive. He returned the next day and forced himself to watch more. His hands shook as he took notes. The recordings showed dozens of battles, hundreds of skirmishes, and thousands of small moments of human soldiers doing impossible things. They fought with broken bones. They continued shooting with wounds that should have been fatal. They gave their rations to hungry alien refugees. They sang songs to comfort dying enemies. But there were other recordings too. Darker ones. Recordings that made even Jiwan uncomfortable. One video showed a human special forces team responding to a distress call. Their alien allies had been captured and were being tortured. The 12-person human team infiltrated an enemy stronghold of over 400 soldiers. What happened next was methodical, efficient, and terrifying. The humans moved through the compound like a force of nature. The enemy soldiers, battle-hardened warriors from a species known for their brutality, broadcast desperate pleas for help. When it was over, the humans walked out with their rescued comrades. The compound was silent behind them. 400 enemy soldiers were dead. The humans had lost no one, though 2 were injured. The mission report was clinical and cold. Objective: rescue 3 captured medics. Status successful. Human casualties none. Jiwan watched this recording 3 times. Each time he felt something twist in his stomach. This was his species. This was what humans were capable of when pushed. Librarian Zeth spoke again. Now you understand why the council voted the way they did. Because we're good at killing, Jiwan said flatly. No, Zeth corrected. Because you don't know when to stop. Every other species has a breaking point. A moment when survival instinct overrides duty. Humans don't have that. When someone you care about is in danger, you will burn the entire galaxy to save them. That's what terrified the Council. Jiwan stared at the frozen image on the screen. A human soldier carrying an alien twice his size to safety, his face covered in blood but his expression determined. They think we're weak, Jiwan said quietly. They think you're civilized, Zeth replied. They see Earth at peace and assume that's your natural state. They don't understand that you chose peace after learning what war costs. That's the difference. Over the next 2 weeks, Jiwan compiled the presentation. He selected recordings carefully, choosing ones that showed both the heroism and the horror. He included testimonials from alien soldiers who fought alongside humans. He gathered statistical data on mission success rates, casualty rates, and medals awarded. 1 week before the presentation, Jiwan's project workspace was destroyed again. This time, someone had smashed his equipment and left a message. Weak humans playing soldier. Jiwan stood in the wreckage and felt nothing. The person who did this had no idea what they were about to see. None of them did. 3 days before the presentation, Talvik cornered Jiwan in the hallway. The reptilian towered over him, his scales gleaming under the artificial lights. I'm looking forward to your presentation, Talvik hissed. Watching you try to explain why your species needs protection will be worth the price of admission. Jiwan met his eyes calmly. You should bring something to take notes. You'll want to remember what you learn. Talvik laughed and walked away, convinced that the human was delusional. That night, Jiwan reviewed the presentation one final time. Hiron and Dowan sat with him in the archive, all three of them silent as they watched the compiled recordings. Are we sure about this? Hiron asked softly. Once we show them, we can't take it back. They need to know, Jiwan replied. Not so they'll fear us, but so they'll understand why the ban exists. Why it's necessary. For their protection or ours? Dowan asked. Jiwan didn't answer immediately. He thought about the recordings, about the humans who fought and died protecting aliens they had just met. He thought about the darkness that lived inside every human, the capacity for violence that they all carried. Both. He finally said, it's for both. The grand auditorium had never been so full. Over 2,000 students packed the seats with another 500 watching from standing room in the back. Species from every corner of the galaxy had come to watch what they thought would be a humiliating spectacle. Jiwan stood backstage, his heart pounding but his face calm. He could hear the crowd through the curtain. They were laughing, making jokes, placing bets on how long it would take before the humans gave up or started crying. Yaren checked the presentation system for the 5th time. Everything is ready, she said quietly. The recordings are loaded. The audio is clear. The backup systems are online. Mirai and Dowan stood nearby providing moral support. The other human students were scattered throughout the audience, their presence a small island of silence in a sea of mockery. You don't have to do this, Mirai said to Jiwan. We can still back out. Say it was a mistake, Jiwan shook his head. They need to see. Professor Korin appeared from the shadows. His insectoid body clicked softly as he approached. The Chancellor is in attendance, he said. Along with most of the faculty. This will be recorded and archived. Are you prepared for that? Yes, Jiwan replied. The professor studied him for a long moment. You've changed since you first came to my class, quieter, harder. I've learned things, Jiwan said simply. You've learned what your species is capable of, Professor Korin corrected. That changes a person, it should. Just remember why you're doing this. The lights in the auditorium dimmed. The crowd's noise grew louder in anticipation. Somewhere in the audience, someone started chanting, "Weak, weak, weak," and others joined in. Jiwan walked onto the stage. The chanting turned to laughter and applause. Not the kind of applause meant to honor someone, but the mocking kind meant to humiliate. Jiwan walked to the center of the stage and stood behind the podium. He waited. The noise gradually died down as the audience realized he wasn't reacting. He simply stood there waiting patiently for silence. His expression gave away nothing. His posture was relaxed but alert. Finally, the auditorium fell quiet enough for him to speak. My name is Jiwan, he began, his voice clear and steady. I'm a third-year xenobiology student from Earth. I'm here today to discuss Regulation 7.3, The rule that bans humanity from participating in interstellar warfare. Someone in the audience shouted, "Because you're weak." Another voice added, "Because you need protection." G1 didn't react. He simply continued. "You all believe you know why this regulation exists. You've made your assumptions clear. You think humans are too fragile, too primitive, too scared to fight?" "That's right." Talvik's voice rang out from the front rows. His friends cheered. "I understand why you think that," G1 said calmly. "Humanity joined the galactic community only 150 years ago. We're newcomers. Our technology is less advanced. Our physical capabilities are average at best. By most metrics, we seem unremarkable." The audience murmured in agreement. This was exactly what they believed. "And it's true that first contact with humanity occurred during Earth's long peace era," G1 continued. "We had experienced no major wars for over a century. The humans who first met you were scientists, diplomats, and explorers. They were peaceful because they chose to be." He paused and looked across the vast audience. Thousands of eyes from hundreds of species stared back at him with varying degrees of amusement and contempt. "But 80 years ago, the galaxy was not at peace," G1 said, his voice growing harder. "The contact wars began. The Krell Dominion pushed into Alliance space. Colonies were attacked. Trade routes were cut off. Civilians were killed, and humanity's new allies asked for help." A holographic map appeared behind him, showing the outer rim territories where the wars had taken place. The audience settled down slightly, curious despite themselves. 50,000 human volunteers were sent to serve alongside galactic forces, G1 explained. They were formed into joint units with soldiers from over 30 different species. They were given standard weapons, standard training, and standard orders. "And they failed," someone shouted. "That's why you were banned." G1's expression remained neutral. The contact wars lasted 3 years. In that time, human forces participated in over 400 major engagements and thousands of smaller operations. And you're right about one thing. At the end of those 3 years, the Galactic Council voted unanimously to ban humanity from all future conflicts. "See?" Talvik stood up, his scaled face triumphant. "You proved our point. You were so useless that the entire galaxy voted to keep you out of warfare." The audience erupted in cheers and laughter. Several students high-fived each other. Someone threw candy toward the stage. G1 waited for the noise to die down again. When he spoke, his voice was ice cold. "You think the ban was passed because we failed, because we were weak, because we couldn't fight." He turned to face the holographic display directly. "Let me show you the real reason." The lights dimmed completely. The massive screen behind G1 flickered to life. The audience fell silent, expecting some kind of embarrassing footage. What they saw instead was helmet camera footage. The quality was military-grade, clear and sharp. The timestamp showed it was 80 years old, from the early days of the contact wars. A voice came through the speakers, translated from human English. "Bravo, squad, advancing on position. Enemy contact in 30 seconds." The camera showed a mixed unit of humans and aliens moving through a devastated landscape. Buildings were collapsed. The ground was scorched. In the distance, weapons fire lit up the darkness. The audience watched as the squad encountered enemy forces. The fighting was brutal and chaotic. Several alien soldiers were hit and went down. The camera showed a human soldier, the name Junho stenciled on his armor, returning fire while dragging a wounded alien behind cover. An explosion rocked the position. The alien officer was hit badly, screaming in pain. Human and alien soldiers fought to hold the position, but they were outnumbered. Then the order came through. "Fall back. All units fall back to secondary positions." The camera showed the squad beginning to retreat. But Junho stayed. He was covering the wounded alien officer, pulling him toward safety even as enemy fire tore through their position. Someone off camera yelled, "Junho, leave him. We have to go." The camera caught Junho's response perfectly. No one gets left behind. What happened next made several members of the audience gasp. Junho's left arm was hit by weapons fire, the limb destroyed from the elbow down. But he didn't stop. He kept dragging the alien officer with his remaining arm. He kept shooting with one hand. He kept moving. By the time reinforcements arrived, Junho had successfully evacuated the officer and held the position alone for 6 minutes. The footage ended with Junho collapsing, his body broken but alive. A text overlay appeared. Corporal Junho received the Star of Valor, the highest military honor. The alien officer he saved, Commander Vroth, survived and returned to his family. He testified that Junho could have escaped easily but chose to stay. The auditorium was completely silent now. The laughter had died. The mockery had stopped. Jiwon's voice cut through the darkness. That's one recording. I have 47 more just like it. The next recording began immediately. This time it showed orbital footage of a civilian evacuation station under attack. Enemy boarding parties had breached the hull. Thousands of civilians, mostly families with children, were trapped inside. The recording showed a small human unit led by a lieutenant named Suho. They held a single corridor against wave after wave of enemy soldiers. The footage was brutal. The humans were outnumbered 10-1. They took hits that would have killed most species but kept fighting. Suho was shot through the chest but continued giving orders, his words slurred but determined. When his weapon failed, he fought with his hands. When he couldn't stand, he fought from his knees. The human unit held that corridor for 6 hours. Every single civilian escaped. Of the 20 humans who made that stand, only 3 survived. Suho was not among them. The last audio captured from his helmet was simple. No one gets past us. Some students in the audience were crying now. Others sat frozen, unable to process what they were seeing. The species known for their warrior culture looked shaken. This wasn't normal combat. This was something else entirely. Jiwon stood at the podium, his face illuminated by the terrible light of the recordings playing behind him. The Galactic Council reviewed all combat data after the contact wars, he said quietly. They found that human forces had a 94% mission success rate, the highest of any species. They found that humans had the lowest casualty rate per engagement. They found that humans received more medals for valor than all other species combined. The audience was completely silent now. But they also found something else, Jiwon continued, something that terrified them. He paused and looked out at the thousands of faces staring back at him in horror and awe. They found that humans don't know when to stop. The screen behind Jiwon flickered again. This time the footage was different, darker, more raw. This is the recording that ended everything, Jiwon said quietly. This is why the Galactic Council voted unanimously to ban humanity from warfare. Not because we were weak, but because of this. The timestamp showed it was from the final year of the contact wars. The location was labeled as Krell 4, a contested mining world deep in enemy territory. The footage began with aerial surveillance of a Krell war camp. The compound was massive, housing over 400 enemy soldiers. Fortified walls, automated defenses, and heavy weapons emplacements surrounded it. A text overlay appeared. Situation: 3 human medics captured during evacuation. Krell forces using them for intelligence extraction. High command orders, mission too dangerous. Do not attempt rescue. The audience watched as the timeline moved forward. Night fell on the planet. The infrared cameras switched on, painting the world in shades of green and gray. Then 12 heat signatures appeared at the edge of the camp perimeter. 12 humans. A special forces team that had ignored the direct order to stand down. What happened next was recorded by multiple camera sources. Krell security cameras, orbital surveillance, helmet cameras from the few enemy soldiers who survived long enough to activate emergency beacons. The recordings had been compiled into a single coherent timeline. The 12 humans moved through the camp like ghosts. No, not ghosts. Ghosts were passive, harmless. These humans were something else entirely. They were death itself, methodical and inevitable. The first guard tower went silent. Then the second. The Krell soldiers inside simply disappeared, their life signs terminating without any alarm being raised. The automated defenses were disabled one by one, their systems expertly sabotaged. By the time the Krell realized they were under attack, the humans were already inside the main compound. The audience watched in stunned silence as the footage showed Krell soldiers, warriors from a species renowned for their brutality and fearlessness, running in panic. They broadcast desperate messages for reinforcements. They activated every alarm. They fired wildly into the darkness, hitting nothing. The humans moved with surgical precision. Every action had a purpose. Every movement was calculated. There was no rage, no anger, no fear, just cold, terrible efficiency. One Krell soldier's helmet camera caught a glimpse of a human operator. The human looked directly at the camera, her face painted with camouflage, her eyes completely empty of emotion. Then the footage cut to black as the Krell soldier died. The recording showed Krell soldiers barricading themselves in defensive positions. It didn't matter. The humans went through walls, dropped from ceilings, and appeared from shadows. The compound's sophisticated defense systems might as well have been made of paper. A particularly disturbing segment showed a group of Krell soldiers surrendering, throwing down their weapons and raising their appendages in the universal sign of submission. The humans zip-tied them, checked them for hidden weapons, and moved on without killing them. Efficient. Professional. But somehow that made it more terrifying, not less. 6 minutes. That's how long it took. 400 Krell soldiers, dozens of automated defenses, fortified positions that should have required an army to breach. 6 minutes. When it was over, the aerial footage showed the 12 humans walking out of the camp. 2 were limping from injuries, but all 12 were alive. Behind them, the compound was silent. The Krell soldiers who survived were in shock, curled in corners, some crying, others catatonic. 400 casualties. 378 dead. 22 wounded so badly they never fought again. Human casualties. 0 deaths. 2 minor injuries. The mission report appeared on the screen. Objective: rescue 3 captured human medics. Status successful. All hostages recovered alive. Human casualties? None. Below that, a note from the Krell Dominion's military command. Request immediate cessation of operations against human forces. Our soldiers refuse to engage. The psychological damage is too severe. The recording ended. The auditorium was silent except for the sound of someone vomiting in the back row. Several students had their faces buried in their hands or appendages. Others stared at the screen in horror. Talvik, the reptilian student who had mocked humanity so confidently, sat frozen in his seat. His scales had paled to a sickly gray color. His mouth hung open. Jiwan let the silence stretch for a full minute before speaking again. That recording was classified at the highest level, he said. The Galactic Council didn't want anyone to see it. They didn't want the galaxy to know what humans are capable of when someone we care about is taken from us. He activated another display. This time it showed psychological evaluation reports, medical analyses, and strategic assessments, all bearing the seal of the Galactic Council. After the Contact Wars, the Council commissioned a comprehensive study of human combat capabilities, Jiwan explained. They analyzed every engagement. They interviewed surviving soldiers from all species. They brought in their best psychologists, strategists, and military experts. The report scrolled across the screen as he spoke. They found that humans possess an unusual capacity for violence when protecting others. They found that humans have virtually no self-preservation instinct when emotional bonds are involved. They found that humans can compartmentalize trauma in ways that allow them to continue fighting long after they should be dead. A particular passage was highlighted on the screen. Human soldiers display a disturbing tendency to treat their own survival as optional when protecting their unit. This is not courage. This is a fundamental difference in threat assessment that borders on suicidal. They also found this, Jiwan continued, highlighting another section. Humans possess an innate ability to visualize and execute violence with a creativity that surpasses any known species. When standard tactics fail, humans improvise with a combination of ruthlessness and ingenuity that is genuinely frightening to witness. He turned to face the audience directly. Many couldn't meet his eyes. The Council's final conclusion was unanimous, Jiwan said. They determined that humans do not fight like other species. We don't have the biological advantages of warrior races. We're not stronger, faster, or more naturally aggressive. But we have something else. Something that makes us more dangerous than any of you realized. The screen showed the final report, stamped with approval from every council member. Jiwan read it aloud. Humans possess a unique psychological trait. They form deep emotional attachments to their unit members regardless of species. Once these bonds are formed, humans will endure any hardship, suffer any wound, and commit any act to protect those they consider part of their group. This trait, combined with high intelligence and adaptability, makes humans the most effective soldiers ever encountered. It also makes them the most dangerous. He paused and looked at Talvik specifically. The report continues. Humans do not know when to stop. They do not recognize defeat when their loved ones are at stake. They will burn worlds, topple empires, and walk through hell itself if it means saving one person they care about. This is not a weakness. This is a strength so terrible that it must never be allowed to fully manifest again. Another recording began playing. This one showed interviews with alien soldiers who had fought alongside humans. Their testimonials were raw and honest. A Saurian commander, from Talvik's own species, spoke directly to the camera. I watched a human private take 17 bullets and continue fighting until every member of his squad was safe. He died the moment the last soldier was evacuated, as if his body had been waiting for permission. I have fought in 30 campaigns. I have never seen anything like humanity's capacity for self-sacrifice. A floating energy being testified. They sang to us when we were dying. Human medics would treat our wounds while under fire, completely exposed, singing their strange songs to keep us calm. 3 of them died protecting my unit. They could have run. They had time. They chose to stay. An insectoid similar to Professor Corin appeared. I asked a human soldier why he risked his life for aliens he had just met. He looked at me like I was insane and said, "Because you're my squad. That's what you do for family." We had known each other for 3 days. The testimonials continued, each one more powerful than the last. Stories of humans giving their rations to hungry aliens. Humans carrying wounded soldiers twice their size across kilometers of hostile terrain. Humans staying behind to cover evacuations knowing they would die. But there were also testimonials from the other side. From Krell soldiers who had fought against humans. One Krell officer spoke with visible terror in his eyes. We captured their wounded once. 3 humans, all badly injured. We thought they would beg for mercy or provide intelligence to save themselves. Instead, they attacked us. With broken bones and mortal wounds, they killed 6 of my soldiers before we could subdue them. Even tied down and dying, they showed no fear. Only hatred that we had hurt their friends. I have never been more frightened in my life. The recording ended with a final statement from the Galactic Council's chief military strategist. We are banning humanity from warfare not as punishment for failure, but as recognition of a capability too dangerous to unleash. They have earned their peace. For the sake of the galaxy, and for their own sake, let them keep it. The presentation ended with the lights slowly brightening in the grand auditorium. Ji-won stood at the podium, his hands steady, his expression calm. Behind him, the screen had gone dark. Nobody moved. 2,000 students sat in complete silence. Some were crying openly. Others stared at nothing, their minds trying to process what they had just witnessed. A few had their heads in their hands, trembling. Talvik sat frozen in his seat, his scaled skin still that sickly gray color. The confident, mocking expression he always wore was completely gone. He looked small somehow, despite his size. Ji-won gathered his materials slowly. He had said everything he needed to say. The truth was out now, recorded and witnessed by thousands. There was nothing more to add. As he walked toward the stage exit, someone started clapping. Slowly at first, then faster. It wasn't mocking applause this time. It was something else. Something heavy with meaning. Others joined in. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was filled with applause. But it wasn't celebratory. It was the kind of applause you give at a funeral. Respectful, solemn. Acknowledging something profound and terrible. Ji-won didn't acknowledge it. He simply walked off stage and disappeared into the corridor beyond. The days that followed were strange. The presentation went viral across the galactic network within hours. Every news outlet picked it up. Academic forums exploded with discussions. Political analysts debated the implications. Military historians wrote papers analyzing the footage. Human enrollment applications to the Galactic Collegiate Institute dropped by 40%. Many alien parents who had encouraged their children to study with humans suddenly reconsidered. Fear, uncertainty, and a new kind of awareness spread through the galaxy. But something unexpected happened alongside the fear. Respect began to emerge. Understanding, a shift in how humanity was perceived. The vandalism stopped completely. The mockery disappeared overnight. Students who had laughed at humans now went out of their way to avoid them. Not from hatred, but from something like reverence mixed with caution. 3 days after the presentation, Ji-won was in the library when Talvik approached his table. The reptilian moved carefully, his body language submissive in a way it had never been before. "May I sit?" Talvik asked quietly. Ji-won looked up from his studies and nodded once. Talvik sat down across from him. For a long moment he said nothing. Then in a voice barely above a whisper he spoke. I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the kind you give because it's expected, but the kind you give because you truly understand how wrong you were. Jiwon remained silent, waiting. I mocked you, Talvik continued. I destroyed your work. I called you weak. I believed humans were inferior because you were banned from fighting. I thought I understood strength. His voice cracked slightly. But I watched those recordings. I saw what your people did, what they're capable of, and I realized something terrible. I would have run. In any of those situations, I would have saved myself. The idea of dying for someone I'd known for 3 days is incomprehensible to me. But for humans, it's just what you do. Talvik looked directly at Jiwon. How do you live with that, knowing what your species is capable of? Knowing that inside every human is that capacity for violence? Jiwon was quiet for a moment, considering the question carefully. Finally, he spoke. The same way you live knowing you could hurt someone smaller than you. The same way every species lives with their own capacity for harm. We choose not to. Every single day we wake up and choose not to become what we were during the contact wars. But it's still there, Talvik said. Inside you. Inside every human. Yes, Jiwon agreed simply. It's still there. But being capable of violence and choosing violence are different things. Earth learned that lesson over thousands of years of warfare. We know what we are. We know what we can do. That's exactly why we choose peace. Talvik absorbed this, his expression troubled. I'm sorry. For everything. I understand if you can't forgive me. I forgive you, Jiwon said quietly. You didn't know. None of you did. That was the point of the presentation. Not to make you fear us, but to help you understand. After Talvik left, Hiran slid into the seat he had vacated. She had been watching from a nearby table. That's the 5th apology you've received today, she said. 6th, Jiwon corrected. Someone left a written note in my locker this morning. How do you feel about all this? She asked. Jiwon closed his book and looked at his friend. Tired, sad, relieved maybe? I don't know. It needed to happen, but I don't feel good about it. Because now they're afraid of us? Because now they understand something about humanity that we've been trying to move past for 200 years. Jiwon replied. We didn't want them to see us as soldiers. We wanted them to see us as scientists, artists, teachers, and friends. But maybe they needed to know both sides. The past and the present. A week after the presentation, Professor Koren called a special assembly. The entire campus was required to attend. The grand auditorium was full again, but the atmosphere was completely different from before. Quiet, respectful, somber. Professor Koren stood at the podium, his insectoid body casting long shadows under the stage lights. I have taught galactic military history for 62 years, he began. I have educated thousands of students from hundreds of species. And in all that time I have tried to help young minds understand the complexity of warfare, the cost of peace and the burden of strength. He paused, his translator crackling slightly. The presentation given by student Jiwon last week has sparked controversy across the galaxy. Some believe it was inappropriate to show such graphic footage. Others argue that the information should have remained classified. There are calls for investigation into how humans gained access to restricted archives. A murmur ran through the crowd. The human students tensed. I am here to tell you that I authorized that access, Professor Koren announced firmly. Because the truth needed to be told. Because mockery based on ignorance is cruelty, and cruelty should never be tolerated in an institution of learning. He activated a display behind him. It showed statistics, historical data, and official council documents. The ban on human warfare was never about protection in the way you understood it. It was about preservation. Preservation of humanity's hard-won peace. Preservation of their choice to be more than warriors. And yes, preservation of the rest of us from humanity's terrible efficiency in combat. The professor's voice grew stronger. Humans discovered peace on their own world after millennia of constant warfare. They learned to control what they are. They chose civilization over their baser instincts. The council feared that throwing them back into war would undo that careful evolution, that humanity would remember what it was like to be predators and forget what it was like to be people. He looked across the assembled students. Every species has darkness, but humans weaponized theirs, mastered it, and then consciously chose to cage it. The ban ensures they never have to release it again. It's not a punishment, it's a gift. To them and to all of us. In the audience, students processed this information in their own ways. Some nodded in understanding. Others still looked uncertain. But the mockery was gone, replaced by something more complex. Respect, fear, curiosity, and understanding mixed together. After the assembly, Jiwan found himself surrounded by students asking questions. Not hostile questions, but genuine ones. Is it true humans feel pain the same way we do, but just ignore it better? My grandfather said a human saved his life during the contact wars. Can you help me find records? How did Earth achieve peace? Our world is still fighting. What was your secret? Jiwan answered what he could, directed others to resources, and declined to comment on questions that felt too personal or painful. Mirai found him afterward, looking exhausted but satisfied. The university has announced new curriculum changes. They're adding a course specifically about human history and culture. They want you to help design it. Me? Jiwan asked, surprised. You started this conversation, Mirai said. You might as well help guide where it goes. That evening, Jiwan stood in the observation deck looking out at the stars. Earth was visible in the distance, a blue dot among billions of others. Hyerin, Doan, and Mirai joined him there. Do you regret it? Doan asked. Showing them. Jiwan thought about the question for a long time. He thought about the recordings, about the humans who had died 80 years ago, about the fear and respect now directed at his species. No, he finally said. They needed to know. Not so they'd fear us, but so they'd understand why we're grateful for the ban. You think humanity wanted to be banned? Hyerin asked. I think humanity earned the right to never have to be that again, Jiwan replied. Our ancestors fought so we could be students, artists, scientists, and friends. Not soldiers. They died so we could choose peace without anyone questioning whether we were capable of protecting ourselves. So the ban isn't a punishment? Mirai asked. It's a gift, Jiwan said, echoing Professor Korin's words. To them and to us, the galaxy gets to sleep safely, not having to worry about what humans might do if pushed. And humans get to live peacefully, not having to become what we're capable of being, but we're still capable of it. Doan said quietly. That hasn't changed? No, Jiwan agreed. It hasn't. Every human carries that potential. But we also carry the choice, the conscious decision to be better than our worst instincts,